Not many people know what it's like working for Disney inside of China. At least, not many people know that who are originally from North America. Yet today, we're going to be joining someone who can finally help us demystify and understand what that experience is like. Hop in, strap in, let's ride. Explaining entertainment, keeping you ahead of the culture curve, that is our goal each and every day here on the WDW Pro channel. If you like content that helps you grow and learn all about entertainment, make sure to click the like button, hit share, subscribe, and remember that you can stick it to those algorithms. When you click it, we're talking about that notification bell. Joining us today to talk about some entertainment stuff you might not hear so much about often is our good friend, Chris. Chris has worked for the Walt Disney Company in the past and also has some rather exciting experiences that we're going to be talking about today, particularly discussing the Shanghai Disney Resort. Chris, welcome to the channel.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Chris, let's dive straight in. Tell us a little bit about how it is that you came to work in China for Disney at their property over in Shanghai. What Robert Iger, I believe, considers to be his biggest achievement in terms of theme parks, on par with the Walt Disney World Resort.
Yeah, I was actually talking about it with my wife pretty recently about how we were in grade school when the plans for Shanghai Disney were going through. They planned this park for years, over a decade. So to finally be a part of it was something else, that's for sure. How did I come across it? Well, they had the opening cast so the expats would be Americans, Australians, Canadians, and UK. All the people from all over the world would come and open the park. I was the second cast to open the park. So when I saw an advertisement one day for auditions in Montreal, Canada, where I'm from, and it basically was, for people like me who probably love Disney and want to, live abroad. So I went to these auditions and by a blessing, my wife and I were both selected to be a part of the Shanghai Disney Resort. So
now you were already a cast member, is that correct?
No. So I had been on cruise line before, and I'd kind of been here and there with the company, but this was the first time going this far abroad. But I've had kind of fun little opportunities here with the company and there with the company, and this was the first time where I saw like an international park. People have been telling me about working at international parks like Hong Kong, Tokyo, for years, but even Paris. But this was the first time I was going to be this far away. This was literally on the other side of the world for me. So we were both blessed to be selected to be a part of it. And I'll tell you, knew nothing about China, knew nothing about the culture or the language or anything like that. And so when we had to wait a while to start prepping all the paperwork, immigration work, and all that stuff. And then I think it took a few months, and then we were. I think it was about March when I arrived, and my wife arrived shortly thereafter.
Now, did the Walt Disney Company assist with all of those preparations? I'm assuming they had all the protocols in place and had milestones for you to achieve.
It was extremely smooth. I think it's like they'd done it before, right? So obviously, I think they're used to doing that. They're used to sending folks over to Hong Kong already, which was a park that had opened previously to Shanghai Disney Resort, and then Tokyo Disney. I think they have their auditions all over the world, and then folks fly to those parks. So they have a pretty good system in place, and it was pretty smooth and seamless. I'd gone through it with Disney Cruise Line of they take care of your travel and hotels and training and all that stuff. It's all there for you, so that it's very easy for you to ease into the roles that you're selected for. And I got to give them credit for that. It's definitely one of the smoothest corporate processes I've ever been through, and they make it very comfortable for you, even though you're going to be going somewhere where you might not feel too comfortable because you're not used to it. So they definitely do their best to make you feel at home.
So of all the international experiences and parks that you could have participated in, what do you think was so alluring to you about going to Shanghai to participate in this opening?
Something was drawing me there. I think it was the fact that it was going to be classified as the biggest park by size, and of course there's an asterisk there because it's not really the biggest. Like it's the biggest collection parks is obviously Walt Disney World, and they have Tokyo Disney Sea, like Shanghai Disney, Tokyo Disney and Tokyo Disney Sea, and like. But this is the largest park in size. So the park itself is they call it Shanghai Disneyland. It's within Shanghai Disney Resort, and that's the largest park by size. And that inspired me. It was going to be the largest castle. So the castle is enormous. If you're ever there in person, it's a lot bigger than when you even see it on pictures online. And I think you're probably even going to be able to show your viewers that.
Absolutely. Now, and so this park is larger. Just to clarify for all the audience, this park is larger than, let's say, Animal Kingdom at Epcot.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's
rather big to give everybody an idea.
It's the largest single park by size. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I guess then I'm also interested. What was the process like once you arrived in China? Once you arrived at Shanghai, what was that? What were those first weeks like? What were some things that surprised you, and what were some things that went really well?
So yeah, that was it was a very, very long flight direct flight from Montreal to Shanghai.
Holy cow! From Montreal?
Yeah, yep, direct. They just opened up a new flight, and it was straight there. So that was a lot of me walking around, so that my legs didn't go to sleep. But I got lucky. I got an exit row, so it was good. But yeah, when we arrived, I think it was at nighttime, but it didn't really matter to me because my biological clock was all over the place. They technically usually have travel buddies, not all the time, but they try to make sure you have a travel buddy. So somebody else was joining me as well from Florida, actually. So her and I met up, and her family had come. Her mom was there, so she was able to travel with us, and therefore it felt sort of like comfortable. Not everybody has that, so I was very fortunate to have that as well. And so they have a driver to get you to where you need to be, where they house you, and that's about half an hour away from the park. I don't know if it still is today. This was a couple of years ago, but yeah, they have a driver for you. They take you out there, and then when you arrive at this place, at this apartment, it's a 2-bedroom apartment that they have for you, and it's fully furnished. It's got cable. It's got movies. It's got a wonderful, like, clean bathroom with like a giant shower. We were again so very fortunate and very blessed. So, but then her and I hit the streets to try and find some food. Did not know what to eat in China. I did my research and still was nervous and still didn't know. So we went to Pizza Hut, and I got Chinese Pizza Hut, and I got pasta. My first meal in China.
How does Chinese Pizza Hut compare to American Pizza Hut?
You know what? There's subtle differences. It's funny because there's subtle differences in everything. They have a Taco Bell opened up there. I think Shaquille O'Neal is the one who helped open it up in downtown Lujiazui, which is the down central area with the spire. You'll see that usually in pictures of Shanghai, and they have the Taco Bell there, and it's actually better in my opinion than American Taco Bell because it's a little more real, the real chicken, real beef, and they actually have margaritas there. It's very interesting. It was different, but everything's different there. So I went for pasta at Pizza Hut, and it wasn't a very creative decision, but it seemed like a safe decision, and it didn't really matter. I was nervous, and that nervousness slowly died down as we started to experiment with restaurants around the area, and we realized, it's really not that different once you adjust to it. But
were you able to speak Mandarin? Did you have any experience with speaking other languages?
I have a little bit of experience speaking French because I'm from Quebec, but Mandarin was new to me, and that was one of those things where I got there. I didn't know that I would be speaking Mandarin. I got there, and I think my first day when I was actually at the park at the office, they go, "Okay, you're going to be speaking Mandarin in what you're going to be doing here at Shanghai Disney." Okay, it's either that or go home. So thankfully, they had a wonderful language teacher for me, and it was a one-on-one language lessons. Again, that also helped, and took about a month, and I got fluent with the language.
Wow, 1 month and you were fluent. I mean, that's not an easy language to learn.
Sorry, I should be clear. Not fluent, comfortable with the language, and therefore, like, because fluency takes years.
Sure. I mean, even being comfortable though, I mean, is quite impressive, because this couldn't have been the only thing that you were doing. I mean, that's just one of the things you had to have been working on for that first month, right?
There's a lot of information. They make, again, like I said, Disney does their best to make you feel at home, and so there's many things that I became a part of for expats. So like there was an expat welcome group that I became a part of to make you feel even more comfortable and more like, hey, you're new here. Let's show you how I went through the same thing. Let me show you what it's like, and how to sort of little hacks here and there, little loopholes you can find so that it makes just life easier there. Because if you go there and you're just dropped in the middle of downtown Shanghai, it's just going to be what are you going to do? Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go eat. I don't know do I pay with cash? Do I have to get an app to pay with? Do I how do I hail a cab? You know, all these things are going through your head. It can be very overwhelming. So yeah, they did their best to make sure we were comfortable. So the first few days were scary, but they took care of us.
All right, so let's talk about some of the stuff that goes along with living in China. Now, you were with Disney, so I'm assuming that the apartment complex was also was owned by Disney as well. Is that correct?
So they
company.
They had contracted a company out. Very, very lovely apartments. I'm not sure if they're still with this company now. I don't really know as many people there as I did, because it's been time. Eventually, folks will end their contracts, and it'll be sort of a lot of turnover eventually. Some people had stayed for 5 years, and I'll tell you, at the end of, as I move towards the end of the video, I'll let you know kind of what it's like to come home after 2 years abroad in a different environment. It's very difficult. So 5 years, I can't even imagine, but people were there for a very long time, from the beginning to just very recently. But they house you in a wonderful apartment, and they have a partnership. They had a partnership with them, and they have a bus that I don't know, again, I'm not sure if all this stuff is still there, but they had a bus at the time, which was, again, they have a schedule you follow, and you go, okay, if I have to be at work at this time, I just have to get on the bus that's half an hour earlier, because all it takes is a half an hour to get to work from the area. It's more closer to the center of Shanghai, the Bund, as they call it. Did
you have any travel restrictions that you couldn't go to certain places, or you couldn't drive your own vehicle, anything like that? Or was that never even part of your sort of orbit of concern?
If I'd stayed there longer, I probably would have looked into something like that. But I think every single one of us, none of us sort of wanted to test those waters, because we were all there with Disney. We wanted to do our best to stay sort of focused on the goal of like working for this prestigious company, in a new environment, a company that there was a lot of pressure on them. So we didn't like to go try like too many new things, because as cast members for Disney, it's like you're under a microscope, especially in that country, because they're putting America under a microscope. So Disney is sort of like a little mini America there. So we had to do everything by the book. So I didn't look into driving. I was curious, but I never was interested, because the highways are crazy there, and they're very interesting drivers in Shanghai. Very capable as well. I didn't see very many accidents, that's for sure.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the pressure that was on everybody involved in this.
Yeah.
Did Disney give you any particular guidance? Did they tell you things that we're not going to deal with as cast members, things that are off limits to discuss? Did they give you internet advice while you're in the country? What all did they suggest?
It's always best behaviors. It's always what would Walt do? But in all seriousness, it was very. There was, again, it's very easy to make a mistake, so you had to really kind of monitor yourself all the time. As Americans, we had VPNs, which is the only way we were able to kind of access our social media or any other sites that were blocked in China. And there were many. There were many news sites that I like here that I couldn't get there. I know Instagram's blocked, Twitter's blocked. Facebook is almost like non-existent there. I think, again, you have to have a VPN or some form of application to access those. So,
but it was okay for you to have a VPN.
Okay for us to have a VPN again, and I talking to a lot of the locals, not okay for them.
Gotcha.
That was, again, and we'll get into that as well. There's just a lot of difference between what we were doing and how we lived and how the locals lived and what they were doing. So,
Gotcha. Now, lead us through a few of the things, some of the cultural differences that you found working at the park that were given to you in training, things that you should do and should not do within Chinese culture that maybe people wouldn't expect. Were there any different hand gestures that you needed to avoid? Were there any phrases that you needed to make sure that you always said? What were some of those things?
There's actually quite a few. I'm trying to remember a few. Like, again, I think the peace sign is not exactly taken the same way as it would be, say, here as just peace. That's just one. But there's it was more. They would tell us again you have to become with an open mind to understand that this is a different culture. So there are a lot of different things that, again, this giant corporation going into this country, which already has its established cultures and ways of life. And when we see certain things that are at the park, to sort of go, okay, don't go crazy over it. It's like the Disney was doing their best to sort of, curb these things. I don't want to get too much into them, but there are certain cultural things that I witnessed myself, almost on a daily basis walking through the parks. And it's just sort of, okay, it's just because it's China, and sometimes they that's what they do here. But I'm never going to be the one to be like, you don't do that, because here I am a guest in their country. So there were certain things they told us, again, best practices. You gotta just really be on our best behavior, be understanding above all things, and empathetic towards other cultures. And that's
well. And is it fair to say that many of the guests that this was sort of a starting experience for them in theme parks, so they didn't really know how some of like the basic amusement park kind of concepts worked?
It absolutely was. And yeah, it's so when I first, my first day of actually getting to tour Shanghai Disney, it was very different from any other Disney park I'd ever visited. I think I'd visited all but Tokyo at that point, and Tokyo and Hong Kong at that point, and then I was just walking around, and it is another world. It is. And they tried their best to make it like there's a cheesecake factory in their version of downtown Disney called Disneytown. And again, you're like, when you see something like that, you're like, okay, I'm home. But it felt very different, because just outside, if you looked, you could see kind of like the surrounding area, like the surrounding city, and it's like, but I'm still in China. So that, if you were taken out of it, I'd see the power lines that were there. It's a lot harder to put something like that there than it was, say, like when Walt put Walt Disney World here in Florida, where all this trees covering everything. There's no sight lines, or because everything's covered. They've got the berms and everything, but they didn't have the ability to do that there. So it was interesting. But walking around the park as well, it's deserted a lot of the time, especially in the spring months, because it was when it was first started to open. So they didn't have a smash opening like they had wanted. And so it was not always very crowded. And I think it took a little bit to get people kind of used to going and understanding what it was to go there. So, but it picked up over my time there.
All right. So, and you may not be able to answer this, but I'm always interested in how it is that some of the guests who arrive at Shanghai do so. So I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. When we had the worldwide situation with the pandemic we've just went through, mm-hmm. I had some reports coming into me that people were sort of selected to go into the park because it needed to have people in there, and because this was sometimes used in sort of a propaganda kind of way. Did you ever get the feeling that on those slower days that people had been elected to be there to make sure that there were guests always to some degree or not?
So you're asking if I'm allowed. To be honest, I'm probably not allowed, but it's not only that, it's probably just, I don't think I was made aware. I did. So when I first arrived, especially in the first few months, I was in a bubble. I did not see really the outside world. Again, Lu Jiazhuwei, the Bund, like downtown Shanghai area, and it's not even called that. I just call it that, just as a regular Westerner. But in that whole area, that's not China. That's westernized China. So I think I went out to TGI Fridays. You know what I mean? I treated it like I was in North America, and like we'd go home at night. We'd take a Didi, which is like the Chinese version of an Uber. I think Didi actually now owns Uber, or the other way around. I can't remember, but yeah, so it very isolated. So I'd go to A to B and never really have to encounter any of the outside world. And it was for a while that I was like this. And then when you start to talk to the locals, you start to understand there is another world outside of the Disney world that you're in. And I think they do their best to try and make you sort of, I think if you never wanted to, or if you didn't want to leave your bubble, you didn't have to. Like I could have gone throughout my entire time in Shanghai and never have known there was actually a real China out there. But I don't. The first few weeks, especially if I was in the park, it was eerie. Again, when it was like not many people there. I don't know if I would have picked up on the fact that if that was on purpose or not, or if there is again. But now, knowing what I know in hindsight and seeing on the TV that they're using it. They use it as a gauge. If you Google Shanghai Disney, it's a lot of talk of what happened over the past few years with the closings of the lockdowns, all that stuff. I can't even imagine what I would have thought if I was there at this period. But yeah.
All right. So tell us what you did during your time there. What were your different roles?
So I was in entertainment. So I hung out with the characters. So I was good friends with Kristoff and Captain America and Thor. And
you kind of look like those guys. So I can see how you would be good friends.
I don't see a resemblance, but yeah.
We'll see if everybody gets those euphemisms we're using right now. But anyway.
Right.
Yeah. So how did that go? How were those meet and greet experiences that you were around, let's say? I got to hang around the characters, like I said, and watch them interact with and I know that there's some pictures here you might share with your audience of the characters interacting with the locals, and that was truly something wonderful. That again, that's that magic of Disney that sort of transcends borders. Because I mean, for many of the Chinese, I think they don't know the Disney Renaissance. They know, I think, I'm not sure exactly what period of time, because I'm not a historian, as to when they stopped. I think during Mao's reign, they stopped receiving sort of all outside culture. So that's when they don't have, I don't think they had The Little Mermaid. They didn't have The Lion King. So those characters are not very popular there. They love Snow White. So she was one of the first princesses out. She was pretty much, if there were restrictions on who was out, she was definitely out. Like they're always making sure that Snow White is visible, because they all know Snow White, but they don't know like Ariel as much. So you won't see her as much. They don't know the newer princesses. They don't, Captain America characters after 2005-ish.
Yeah, yeah. And then they definitely know Marvel, but they don't know Star Wars, because Star Wars was during their blackout, their entertainment blackout. They had a Star Wars tent that was Bob Iger's idea. And personally, I'm not going to get into it, but I think it should have been an attraction that should have been an attraction that was just a phenomenal one, that would have introduced people who went to Shanghai Disney to Star Wars. Therefore, they would have had a better, I think, run with the Star Wars trilogy and the new trilogy as well, like for the box office. I don't think they did very well there, and I don't think anybody knew who they were, the characters. So he had a tent in place of that attraction. It was a meet and greet tent, but it was always empty. There was nobody ever there because nobody knew who they were. So that was
so let's pretend for a moment that there's a new Marvel superhero who is going to go to Shanghai Disney and meet with some of the local fans there coming in as guests to the park. What advice would you give to said brand new Marvel superhero wanting to do that? What would be the best way to go about it?
Well, if you're Captain America, if you're humble like Captain America, or charming like Thor, or goofy like Kristoff, I think you'll do just fine. They really do enjoy that. They're very gracious. They're very patient and kind. And again, watching these, just going back to what I was saying before, is you'll see some of these pictures of the interactions, and that's what it's all about. It's really nice to see these characters interact with locals. Again, these locals have never been able to have this experience. They didn't grow up with Walt Disney World. The majority of them didn't. The majority of them have never been to Tokyo Disney Sea or anything like that. They're not used to leaving China. So this is Disney coming to them. And so it's really a special moment. And a lot of them, they tell you at Disney, a lot of these guests, this may be their only trip to Disney in their lifetime. And that's why we have to make it the best for them. Well, in Shanghai, this is truly the case. A lot of these guests will never come back, just due to because the country is so big. It's that they're not used to traveling on vacation on a regular basis. So this is a special event for them. So meeting the characters it's really a trip. It's really nice to see them interact and sort of get used to meet and greets that we're so used to here in the
when
West.
they meet the characters. I'm really curious about this. How did they respond to sort of taking on this fantasy immersion? Because that's something that we've come accustomed to in the West, where we know to pretend. And so then the adults pretend along with the kids and we all have a good time, and teenagers don't. And that makes them feel edgy and, they're on their own little island. But how did Chinese adults respond to that idea, that concept of, okay, we're going to pretend for a moment that this is all real?
The younger generations obviously had an easier time. A lot of fun was watching, Captain America or any of the other our VIP characters, Goofy, Mickey, meeting the older local Chinese and just watching their reactions. Is just they're very deadpan, very serious, and these characters are trying to get them to interact and sort of play along with them, and it was. Of course, very difficult, but you see sometimes them crack a smile because they're sort of like this. They find it so unusual because they're not used to. We're so used to here in the West, like entertainment is just such a form now. Like it's nobody at all it balks at going to meet a princess at a park or even when you see like not Disney parks or whatever, you see these characters outside, mini malls advertising stuff. Like that's not a shock to anybody here, but in China that's like whoa. So whenever the older locals will see that, they're still used to, again, the times of when they didn't have very at least westernized entertainment like that. So now, it's interesting.
What percentage of the cast members do you think were from China versus international cast members who had been brought in?
I'd say it's probably about 90 to 95% were from China, were local from China. Because again,
okay, so you were a little bit of an oddity, I guess.
We were, and that was fun as well because everybody sort of, you get used to stairs a lot everywhere you go, and it's fascinating. It is truly fascinating. I'm pretty tall, so that was another thing that caught people off guard. Is everybody would always just look at, when I went down to the Bund, which is it's a heavy tourist attraction on the river across from all the tallest skyscrapers in the world. We went there for fun a few times just to kind of get the reaction. People would take pictures with you like you're a celebrity. It was pretty funny. Yeah.
So in your time there, I'm assuming that you were able to build some friendships with cast members who were from China. Can you tell us about some of those experiences?
Yeah, I actually, we bonded over the language. So I was desperately trying to learn the most of Mandarin that I could in the month that I was being taught it one-on-one. And while I was doing that, I would go outside the learning room and I'd see my fellow cast members and I'd try to converse with them. I conversed with one of my first friends there was this janitor. And he came in to clean the area where we did one of the shows. And he came in there every day and he'd "Nietzsche Fanma?" He asked me that every day. I had no idea what it meant. "Nietzsche Fanma? Nietzsche Fanma?" It means have you eaten yet? Which is basically their way of saying like how are you? Which is so the answer became wo chiguola. Yes, I did. Yes, I've already eaten. So it was, and trust me, the tones are probably way off right now, and I've got to desperately practice. I'm trying to teach my daughter. I'm going to try and teach my daughter Mandarin and try and make her the Mandarin speaker I wasn't. But yeah, so that janitor and I bonded over that, and I got to learn about where he was from, his hometown, and sort of like I think there must have been a massive casting call for the Disney parks, and I think a lot of people were swarming to kind of, because once you could to work there, because once you could work there, I think there's skills maybe you'd gain working for this company that you could use at other companies, or maybe help yourself out. It was an opportunity for a lot of these folks. So I remember also just meeting a lot of the local cast and just learning how they lived. And like I said, fascinating, because it's really just interesting to sort of tell them about how we live and then kind of exchange information. It's a great learning experience. And I made a lot of friends there, and I miss all of them dearly. I don't speak to really any of them anymore because I didn't keep WeChat for certain reasons, because that's a whole other story. But yeah, but I didn't keep it, so therefore I wasn't able to keep my connection with a lot of my friends over there.
All right, and so let's talk about something that is a little tricky on YouTube, and just tricky too, because I know you don't want to be negative about your experience, and that's not the focus of this. But we do need to, I think, broach this because the audience will have questions about it, and that is that former Attorney General William Barr had really criticized Disney in particular because he had said that the management at Shanghai Disney was largely comprised of individuals, members of the Chinese Communist Party. Was that ever anything that entered into your purview or the purview of other cast members? Was there ever any kind of sort of wall there where you said, we don't talk about that, and we don't go into those offices, and we don't, we're in our bubble over here, and that's where we need to be?
I'll tell you, Pro, we don't talk about that. We don't go into those offices. Those offices weren't actually on property anyway. We do know that the company has another owner as well, and it's part owned. So Disney isn't the full sole owner of Shanghai Disney Resort, and people can look that up. I didn't know much. I think the less I knew, the better. It was going to be an easier time for me. Again, like I said, I tried to get in as little trouble as possible over in there. A lot of these things I only began to question when I got back.
Gotcha.
Interestingly enough, I'm not sure why I didn't bother questioning it then. I think I was having such a great time over there. I never thought of a lot of this stuff. It was there. It was always there. I mean, I remember, I'm going to tell this story. I remember asking two people about Chairman Mao. My mom had brought me a book.
Wait a minute. You just said you didn't want to get into trouble.
Well, no. This isn't specifically with the company. So therefore, because again, their company, their relationship with China, that's something above, something it's way worse. I don't ever want to talk about that. But,
okay, I'm with you.
But it was, I was curious, and this is the one time where I did kind of poke the bear a bit. So my mom had brought me a biography of Chairman Mao, and I read through it, and I actually. I'd known a little bit about him before, but if anybody who's familiar with him, his behavior throughout history was abhorrent. He's one of the more forgotten, I think, terrible dictators in history. But
I think we default to the European bad actors, and we don't pay attention to the many millions of lives that were lost to bad decisions by bad people in Asia.
And honestly, I didn't know. And to be fair, it was never taught to me in school. So I read this biography, and I went up to one day at work. I went up to my language coach, not my language teacher, my language coach, and I asked him. I go, "What do you think about Chairman Mao?" And because he saw I was reading the book, and he goes, "Oh, he is a great man, like a god." Like a god. And he was dead serious. He thought he was just the greatest thing since sliced bread. I was okay. All right. I didn't want, and that's where I'm stopping. I'm not going to start challenging.
Right. Because that had to have given you pause in your own mind to go, whoa.
That's not where I'm not about to go challenging that.
Truman Show. I have just crossed the Rubicon. There's something not right here.
There was something, and that's again where I'm poking that bubble a bit and sort of being like, huh? I asked my language teacher. So again, my language coach and then my language teacher, two different people. My language teacher, I asked her about Mao, because I asked her in Chinese, and she goes, Right. But I could see fear in her eyes, and for somebody who's been dead for the last 50 years, that was interesting to see.
Well, those ideas aren't dead, and they're
those
dead.
Ideas are not dead. Yeah.
Right.
But
they will.
But I don't like to talk about the company's relationship. That is a whole, that's above my pay grade.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about the guests. I'm curious, were there any international guests? Did you ever need to switch over to English because you had guests from Europe, or was this just 99% of the time Chinese guests?
You would get some interesting guests, and they would stand out when they were not from China, or like either local or across China. I'll tell you about some of the interesting guests that I only got to brush with very briefly. I know a lot of your viewers follow the Marvel universe. Well, they had the premiere for the Avengers. I think it was Endgame at Shanghai Disney Resort at the theater there, and we got to see all of the celebrities from the Marvel series. So there was Robert Downey Jr., there was Paul Rudd, there was I think Luke or Chris Hemsworth. Yes, here I am showing my knowledge, right? But
are you close up, and do you get to be in close proximity?
I've actually some of the photos actually that you're going to be showing your viewers here will show some of them. Yeah, we got quite close. I think at one point they were at the Club 33, which Shanghai Disney has. It's a lot easier to get into this Shanghai Disney into this Club 33 than it is at the one at Walt Disney World and Disneyland. But yeah, so they were out on the terrace for Club 33, and you could see them just looking out, and you could wave to them, and they were there. My wife saw them very closely. And there was other movie premieres there, like the Pirates of the Caribbean 5 that we'd all like to forget. But the movie premiere was at the same theater, and so I got to see Johnny Depp and Javier Bardem and Orlando Bloom and Jerry Bruckheimer. It was really neat to see them up close, like literally within an arm's length, and so they were given tours of the park as well. So you'd see them, like you'd hear about people seeing them throughout the park. Oh, I saw Johnny Depp, you know what I mean? And it was very interesting. So,
and I assume that they were being handled in such a way that they never ran into a situation where you went, oh, they look a little out of their comfort zone right now.
No, they were, and I think Robert Downey Jr. was probably the most comfortable of all, because there's a picture he posted to his Instagram, literally, of our backstage area, one of our backstage areas, and that's I think of it. You have that as well for your audience. I'm not sure if it's flashed by yet, but yeah, that is a pretty cool picture. He put that on his Instagram, and it's like I walk that hallway every day, and there he is, just chilling.
Sure, yeah. Sure. All right, tell us about some other really cool memories from your time at the park. Any special interactions with special guests? Any interactions that really stick out in your mind as being extraordinarily meaningful?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just when you're seeing these children, many of whom are being taught English a lot. That's another thing a lot of people don't know about China, is a lot of their.
So let me follow up on that real quick. I don't mean to interrupt you. Were there ever times when you were expected to speak English to Chinese guests because that's what they wanted?
Oh yeah. They actually would prefer us to speak English.
Okay.
Yeah. And even a lot of the time it was difficult for the adults, but the kids are learning English at an alarming rate. My wife, for a period of time when she wasn't working with Shanghai Disney, was teaching English there. And again, they're very bright, and they're learning English from a very young age, and they're being prepped for the future. And I think it's very smart on China's part to be teaching their kids our language. But yeah, so talking with them and just sort of, it's always fun seeing the characters make guests smile, no matter the age, right? But it's very special to see it in between these our little guests. 3 to 6 years of age is probably the best age, where you get to see them and just sort of really believe, in their moment with Captain America, that, and maybe even be inspired by that, or to, have Thor, temporarily lose his powers and then not be able to lift Mjolnir, and then have him put his hammer in the middle of the arena and have a child be able to lift it. You know what I mean? It's pretty neat. And again, I don't think Thor's allowed to do that, but it was, some moments are they're okay to break the rules, I think, to make a little magic.
Now, is Captain America called Captain America in Shanghai Disney?
Migua Doijang. That is his name there, and so therefore, that's if somebody's yelling that out at you or at Captain America, he's going to recognize.
What does that translate to?
America Captain.
Oh, okay. So it's
America
basically a straight translation of the name. Okay.
A lot of it's a lot of reversed. Thor is
noun then adjective, right?
Yeah. And then Thor was Leishan. I think I might be wrong about that one, but I've got, because again, I just brought my book just in case of all my practice, my Chinese and opinion, because it's fun. But yeah, they had I tried to learn all of the different names in Chinese just in case I wanted to help Captain America with speaking with the guests.
Yeah. So, now in the domestic parks and I guess all the other parks too, cast members tend to have those days that they go to the park just to have fun. Did you receive those as part of your stay there? Did you get to just go and have fun I know it was tough for you to be just a random guest. You probably stood out, but what would you recommend for someone going to Shanghai Disney? What are the best attractions there?
So this is an interesting question for me because when I first arrived, I was a little, I was coming from Walt Disney World and Disneyland, where both those parks are packed to the brim with attractions. So Shanghai Disney is what they would call a growing park. There's a lot of room to grow there.
We wish all the parks were like this.
Yeah, well, in a way though, because the local culture likes to spread out. They like to have picnics. So like they'll have a whole grassy area where they can lay out a blanket and just
okay, let's pause on that then, because I'm very interested in this. So I was told by someone who worked at the park as well that one of the difficulties was that what you're talking about, this sort of picnic layabout kind of I don't know, cultural thing, this phenomenon would happen in places that were not appropriate for it to occur, and then you had to figure out a way to recommend that people not picnic in the queue or in the castle entryway or in various places that are off limits. So talk to us a little bit about that, because that's not something we do. We do all kinds of other weird stuff in the West.
There was a few things. There was, like I said, a few cultural things that were done in places they shouldn't have been done. I
think okay, just give them the wink. Let them know.
Yeah, no, I don't think we have to imagine too hard to know what I'm talking about.
Custodians worked a little bit more.
A little harder than
harder. That's right.
They work very hard here, let me tell you. But they work very hard there as well. So, but when I got there, I was I don't want to say disappointed. I was like, wow, where are all the rides? But I realized that again, they built this park for a different clientele, a different culture, and in a lot of ways, their best rides were the ones that you wouldn't really imagine. Like their best ride in Shanghai, because Pirates of the Caribbean is a classic here. It's great, but I don't know if a lot of people would classify it as one of the best rides. I think probably for memorability, but for thrills, not really. But in Shanghai, yes, absolutely. It's a completely unique take on Pirates of the Caribbean. That was one of the coolest rides there was Pirates of the Caribbean Battle for the Sunken Treasure. And if you get a chance to YouTube it or even just travel out there, it's a fascinating ride, and you get to it's all kinds of new technologies. The way the boat moves, everything is just very thrilling. And I never want to put down. I'm a fan of the classic myself, but I know that people like thrills, and that's very thrilling in Shanghai. Another ride is Tron, which just opened here at Walt Disney World. Tron was first in Shanghai Disney, and that was one of their focal points because you could see it from very far away. The glowing domes. Sure. I'm not sure what you would call that. The net over the ride. Yeah. So that was a very thrilling ride as well. So those are two of my favorites. But
there were some attractions over there that just wouldn't work in other places, or not even attractions. But what are some of the things that were designed into the park that they just wouldn't play well in Disneyland or Walt Disney World?
It's interesting because they and this is a whole other discussion, but like they cloned a lot of rides. So my being drawn to Shanghai Disney for me was going like, oh my gosh, this park's going to be unlike any other park I've ever worked at, and in many senses that's correct. But when I arrived, I noticed there were a lot of there was Buzz Lightyear in Tomorrowland. But they also have Toy Story Land, which is confusing. That was I'm a little OCD with that, but that was one thing where I'm like, I think they would have come up with something a little more. I think a lot of what they were trying to do was gear it towards movies that they knew. So I think I don't actually. I trying to understand. I think there's an in-depth video you could probably do about why they made certain decisions.
Sure.
I always tried to figure it out. I'm like, why is this here? Or why not this? Or why? Like, I think again, it gets extremely hot at Shanghai Disney or in Shanghai, about 100 degrees in the summer, like Florida in many ways. No water.
What about winter temperatures?
Winter temperatures are about I'd say about in the 40s.
Okay.
Lowest in the 40s.
So maybe a little colder than Florida then.
A little colder than Florida, but there's one water ride, but you don't really get very wet. So it's, again, I think that like something like a flume ride might have, or some sort of water attraction, more like indoor outdoor, would have worked there, which would have been popular both in the winter and the summer. For some reason they didn't build that. I'm not sure if it was a budgeting concern or what, but there was a few interesting choices that I would not maybe if I had been planning out the parks have made. But that's a whole other video, like I said. But some of the stuff there, they had Seven Dwarfs Mine Train was another clone. They had Soarin', but they had something that would not work here. That was your original question. They have like a rock climbing course, almost like an obstacle course where you basically hook into like a wire, and you're basically following along this obstacle course, and you have, I think, 3 different levels of difficulty. And it's very interesting because you get to like walk behind a waterfall and kind of like.
Man, I wish that would work here. I would love that.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing. Is like I loved it too, but I think again they were doing research in the culture of what I think thought that the Chinese would like, and I think they like a lot of outdoor active activities is what I think they came to the conclusion.
You're making us sound bad, Chris.
What's that?
You're making us sound bad right now.
I know, right?
Westerners, they're not really into that whole physical.
Not really into that sort of thing, yeah.
That whole get your body up and move. I mean, just walking through the park is pushing it. Is
there a screen involved?
Ready.
But yeah, I mean, so that was one that I don't necessarily. I've never seen it here. I think the closest thing I could have seen here is the Swiss Family Robinson house. So I don't know that that sort of obstacle course thing would play well here. But that's a heck of a thing. We should turn the Swiss Family treehouse into an obstacle course and get a tree climbing thing.
That's right. Hook you in where you can't fall off and climb those branches that every kid, when they've been over there, wanted to go across the rails to.
Hey, I'm like you. I'd be interested in that. Swiss Family Robinson was one of my favorite attractions as a child. So
yeah, finish it with a zip line. It'll be perfect. Yeah, you land at the Crystal Palace, you're good to go.
Popped it off, yeah.
Well, Chris, tell us about towards the end. What was it that made you decide? All right, I'm going to finish my time up here. I'm ready to head back. And what was that sort of transition back into the West like?
So, the transition into the West was really difficult. I'm going to say that right now. I don't think I was prepared for how emotionally and mentally exhausting it was to come back. I think there's a lot to do with the biological clock involved. That was hard. What's brought us to that decision was a mutual decision with my wife and I, where we discussed, okay, we've been here for 2 years now. It's like, do we want to continue on, which we were given the option to, or do we want to start heading back west and see about some new adventures? And it was a mutual discussion. We figured, okay, it's time to go. And 2 wonderful years there. A lot of friends made, a lot of interesting situations that I didn't even get to on this chat. But we decided to go home. It was going home that was very hard. I found it very difficult to. I think I remember. My mom and I would travel to Plattsburgh often, which is just over the border in New York State. And I think I remember going there to one of their grocery stores and just seeing the amount of flavored chips that they had. And I think I remember I broke down a bit and just thought, how is this possible that we have so much choice here? Because I came from a place where they really weren't there yet in a lot of ways. and I'd adjusted, and I've been fine with it. I think I think I've been like, you know what, it's really not so bad. We lived fine still, even, you know, given the fact that it was very, very different. The same in a lot of ways, but very different in most. So yeah, I was sitting in that chip aisle going, I just emotionally was struck by that. I just, because it's so different. You learn to live with less, I think, when you're there, because many of my friends I mentioned that I spoke to didn't have the same opportunities that we had, working as Westerners working for Disney. They did not live
That's what I was going to say. It sounds like you had a tremendous amount of additional freedoms that they didn't. I mean, they were living in a completely different world. So then for you to come back and freedom of choice and freedom of selection and the abundancy that we have here, for that to overwhelm you, I can't even imagine what it would be like. I mean, it must be otherworldly to even try to describe, you know, to somebody who's having most of their decisions made for them, what that's like.
And it is. And I'd spoken to other cast members who'd come home, and it was a very similar story with them as well. And I was like, okay, so it's not just me. It's sort of like you're coming back from this. And I'd visited home. It just was strange. It was coming home and being like, it was a final thing. I'm home now in the West. And it was just, it was so different. I felt like, I think my time there, I started feeling like a local, and I'd really gotten used to it. But again, I wasn't going to stay there forever. And I'm actually very, you know, I shouldn't say this, but I'm very thankful I wasn't there over the past few years, because it sounds like
well, I mean, it's understandable.
Extremely difficult for cast members and locals. I think,
oh well, I mean, some of the stuff that's happened where they locked down the park. I mean, that's been crazy.
That's another video in itself as well about what somebody like me would have done during that time. Is not very much. But you're paid, which is nice, but it's just, you're just in your apartment all the time, which is what I understand. A lot of the cast members were there during the lockdown, just trying to not be bored, not, you know, and not because they weren't allowed out. They basically just were inside their apartments. And it was a point where they got very bad there. And again, I don't want to get too much into detail there, but I heard that they were having a lot of trouble. They were having to coordinate with other expats from different other companies that were working in Shanghai and trying to make sure that they got food from America, because it wasn't working.
And I mean, we could detour and talk about some of the horrors. We could talk about welding doors shut, but you know,
that is
find that. But
I'll tell you, that was also heartbreaking. Again, living there for 2 years, it's like it was like a home to me. And so witnessing what happened over the past few years, and again, the sort of the rising tensions with the countries, and it's hard to watch. It's hard to see. And knowing that I have friends over there who I love dearly, and who are, you know, now it's, you know, it's going to be, the next few years are going to be interesting as well. I hope and pray that nothing extreme happens, but you never know.
Yeah. All right. So we need to wrap this up, because I mean, we could go on for another hour. I'm loving these stories, and maybe we'll do another video soon in the future. But give us sort of your take, I guess, having done this. What's your take on China? What's your take on Disney in China? What are your thoughts generally about that? And third question, how would you recommend somebody who was interested in doing this adventure like you, that they approach it?
I think approach it with optimism. Now I would say approach it with a little more caution, but don't lose the optimism. The reason the caution would just be because it's a very different world now the past few years for everybody. So heading to like a country that's had such extreme lockdowns now, you're gonna have to. That was never something I ever had to evaluate. So now it'd be something like, if you're planning on wanting to work for Disney in Shanghai, I would look into whether you're willing to maybe be not working too much while you're there. That's a concern now, because you just never know what the government's going to do, and they have absolute full say there. So but the optimism, I want to go back to that, because it's such a great experience. I have so many amazing memories, and there's stuff I didn't even get to. I got to work in orphanages and go to the hospitals with Disney volunteers. I got to. I'm
assuming with heroic friends, let's say. Is that right?
No, well, actually, no. Just me, myself, and my volunteer shirt, and that was actually just sometimes with Mickey would join us.
Gotcha.
And they had Mickey everywhere. That they really pushed, because again, if they weren't familiar with Mickey before, they would be after the Shanghai
That's
Disney
a
Resort
problem.
there. But well,
That's a problem.
that is true. But he went everywhere. He did like a publicity tour. He was, I got to do so much there. Like I got to hang off the side of a building. Well, so did Mickey. They had a picture of him. I think you have one of those to show your audience as well. One of these pictures will show you that Mickey's hanging off the side of a building doing that. He got to go to the Great Wall of China. That was pretty neat. But what I got to do is I got to do all those things as well. So basically, I followed Mickey. But there was like, my wife and I traveled to many different Asian countries. We went to Dubai even at the end of our trip there. It was just, again, because right now thinking of going to any of these locations, it's a lot more difficult. Just even before the whole mess with over the past few years, it was hard to plan a trip to Asia. But now it's even harder. But like we had the opportunity to do that when we were there. We were conveniently located. And there's just so many wonderful memories, so many amazing people, and there's stuff I didn't even mention that it was a wonderful time.
Well, those things that have not been mentioned, let's come back and we'll do this again sometime.
Sure.
Chris, thank you so much for being here and educating us on this. The number of people who have done this is quite small. The curiosity is high. People are especially interested right now in the relationship between Disney and China and all the messiness that's involved there. And for my part, I just hope that in whatever ways possible that it's a positive thing in the world, and hopefully we can avert some of the more negative consequences that can happen. I would love to see all of these things turn out as best as possible, despite the diverging opinions and diverging paths of the countries that are involved in the world right now. But I hope everybody's enjoyed this. If you have, click like, share, subscribe, the notification bell, click it and stick it to the algorithms. And we covet your comments. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.